Hello guys. I hope no one is tired because of Pawan's memes. काफी known है Pawan के talks and उनके memes. My talk wouldn't have those memes, but I'll make sure that obviously it would be interesting. It's about web performance metrics. So how many of you like JavaScript? ठीक है, काफी सारे हैं. Cool. How many of you don't like? I'm assuming the others who haven't raised their hands, they don't like JavaScript or they haven't used JavaScript. ऐसा can I assume it कि JavaScript use नहीं किया है? ठीक है. But this talk is going to be a generic one. I'll talk more about web performance metric in a certain cases for certain users, right? So you need not worry for the people who might not like JavaScript, and for the people who like JavaScript, they'll be happy because few slides are very centric to JavaScript. So I'll move forward. Okay, so I'll just introduce, though Prem already did that. So I'm Suman Ghosh, and I'm working as a front-end engineer at Cred. Prior to that, I was working at Navi and Geeks for Geeks as a software engineer, and I've mentored a lot of people in front-end. So yeah, that's all about me. Cool. Web performance. Everyone knows about web performance, right? Everyone knows? Anything that you guys might be developing, may it be like irrespective of any platform, mobile, web, you all know about web performance, right? And it is important. What is there in web performance? What is web performance? It's just the measurement of the time, right? The measurement and the speed in which you are getting the response of whatever you want to search, right? That is the web performance. Now, when we are talking about web performance, why are we talking about web performance? So as I told you, here in this presentation, in this talk, it is going to be very specific to a user segment. So the web performance that you might have heard of till now, it's generally for the people who are quite privileged. Here, many of you might be already having an iOS phone or good MacBooks or devices that are of good quality, right? But have you ever thought of that not all products that you might be creating would be for the same users, the privileged ones? They might be for the users who might not have a good internet connectivity, might not be having good devices as you are, or the other resources that are actually required to make your websites fast, right? So that is where I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the user experience, keeping in mind the web performance from the perspective of a tier 3 user. Now, you might be considering that why should you be concerned about tier 3 users? You are in tier 1 city, you have everything. But we all are developers, mostly we are developers right here, or into tech. So you might be using or creating websites that are used by tier 3 users. So coming back, that why should we even care for this use case? Firstly, we are developers, we might be creating websites that would be used by the people who are in tier 3 cities. But one more thing, let's understand the problem apart from that. It is not about the tier 3 cities, guys. You might also face the same problem, I'll tell you. So 4 years back, now we have 4G, now we have 5G, we have everything. But can you think of 4 years back when you just had a random mobile phone which costed around 4,000, 5,000, and we had 2G network? क्या होता था उस टाइम पे? So whenever you search something, काफी ज़्यादा time लगता था. And you were quite patient, right, about that, because you knew कि we don't have those resources due to which you might get the response, which might take some time, right? Am I right or wrong? How many of you have been into that situation 4, 5 years back, where you didn't have that resources which would actually give you a good web performance or a website that would be really fast? I guess almost every one of you might have faced this situation. So that is the problem when I say that why should you consider this problem? We have also used older devices, right? Not all of us, even the newer Android users or the iOS users, we have really good devices. Also, we are not facing any poor network issues, but back that time, We didn't have quite good network connections, right? Then you might be located in rural area. That is what we are going to talk about. And then there are some apps which actually might not work in a few devices, right? So that's the problem. Now, considering the main problem, why am I talking about this? As I told you, that when you all talk about web performance, right, or web performance metric, you all consider privileged users. I don't think many of you, while creating apps, you keep in mind users who might not be actually having the facilities. Have you ever thought about it? Many of you might be already working as developers, and the apps that you might be creating would be for the privileged users. Yes or no, guys? How many of you are working on products that are actually not for the rural areas? How many of you? I see many. Apart from that, are you guys creating something for the rural areas? Yes? Who's there? That's great, that's great. Then I guess you can completely relate to it. So yeah, that's the main problem, that the web performance, that the metric that we generally try to enhance is only for the privileged users, and we misconsidering people who are from these tier 3 areas. Now, for some users, guys, as I told about the tier 3 areas, so good web performance is something that is not achievable every time. If you will not have a good device, if you don't have a good network connection, network connectivity, do you ever think even if you create a very fast website, it won't work? No, because those resources aren't there, right? So when we consider about web performance, a good web performance, it's not necessary that it is always achievable. But then you might be thinking, अरे यार, you are talking about a secret web performance, कुछ तो होगा उसमें that would actually help you to enhance the web performance. Cool, let's see. But as we are talking about that, web performance is not always achievable. Let's understand that what are the bottlenecks, or what are the primary things that actually affect the web performance of any website or any app. So as you can see, there are these two, on a high level perspective, I'm talking about these are the two primary bottlenecks. Number one, network utilization, and number second, the end user device compute. So firstly, we'll talk about network utilization. Anyone knows about what we are going to talk about network utilization, or do you know about latency? How many of you know about latency or have heard this jargon? Come on, yaar, I know many of you here are developers, or you might have created APIs in general. So you might have heard of latency, right? So when I talk about network utilization, it is nothing but it is the latency, the round trip. Let's see what is network latency. So it is just the amount of time it is going to take when you are actually requesting for something, and till the time you actually get the response for that request. So that total time, the round trip, this whole thing is what we call network latency. But can you think, why are we talking about latency when we are talking about web performance? Why are we talking about latency? Obviously, if you might have seen, we talk, no, कि यार API बहुत slow है. Developers know this, कि यार 2 seconds लग रहा है. It should be in milliseconds, right? Because this is the actual metric. You might be, people who are there, developers, they have a whole metric, keeping a track ki which API is taking how much time to actually give a response, right? So this is what network latency is. Now, generally, why we are talking about latency here? So latency is generally higher in places like tier 3 and rural areas. You would agree with that? Why is latency higher? Any idea why I'm saying so? Correct. Network connectivity, right? The devices, we'll talk about devices, why I'm talking about devices so much. We'll look into that also. But yeah, why I was talking about latency, let's deep dive when I'm saying that in rural areas, we might not be able to give a website that would have really high performance, right? So first part is latency, and latency is generally higher in rural areas. But how would it actually affect? With higher latency comes higher TTFB. How many of you know TTFB, what TTFB is? Only one? Okay, two? So I'll tell you what TTFB is. If you can see, it is time to first byte. By just the name, can you understand, or if you could tell me that what TTFB can be? Time to first byte. I'll show you. So actually, TTFB is the actual web performance metrics, which is going to tell you the amount of time or the measurement of time it takes for a user when he actually requests for something, and the response that you are getting, no, it's actually in form of bytes. So the first byte when it comes till the time you have actually requested for a response, that time is called, that particular metrics is called time to first byte. Now, so as I told you, we have high latency in rural areas, and how is that affecting? It is affecting in this web performance metric, which is TTFB. It is increasing the time to first byte. And what do I mean by that? The time to first byte is higher. So again, I'll take you back for years when we were using 2G. So everyone knows when we typed something, when we were searching any website, so there was a loading button, loading scroller that used to come, right? And we used to wait for some time. So that was because of this higher latency, guys. And obviously other factors are there, but one of the factor was higher latency, because of which the data which you had requested was taking some time to actually load on your screen. Even the first byte, that was taking some time. So the reason was actually the higher latency, and other factors are also there. So now, as we have discussed about the network latency and how is it going to affect the rural areas, let's come to the second point when we are actually saying that the end device compute. So I'll talk about end device compute, but before that, let's understand the device usage. Why am I talking about devices so much? So let's understand the device usage in rural areas. Most of us has mobile phones and as well as laptops, right? Yes or no? Yes? But what do you think? In rural areas, people would be having mobile phones or laptops? Hands up for mobile phones. Okay. Hands up for laptops. Okay, yeah, actually, that is the number of people who are having laptops in rural areas. You are very right. But what do you think? Why do they only have mobile phones rather buying laptops? Cost, right, I heard cost. Affordability, right? A laptop which doesn't have anything, and even if you want to code something, let's say a basic laptop would cost you 20,000, a small laptop. That too, I'm citing a very low price, 20 to 30K, right? And generally a mobile phone in which you can do everything, that would cost you 6, 7,000, right? So yeah, you guys are right. So in rural areas, people use mobile phones, and why do they use mobile phones? Only because it is affordable, right? So now let's understand that why we are talking about devices that much. So the parsing and compiling of data in phones can often be 2 to 5 times longer than on desktops. Why I'm saying so? Let's see. So the data comes, right? But the end computation is done by the hardware, right? It's not just the software that you can make fast. It's all about the hardware also, right? That we sometimes miss while calculating the metrics. So now we have considered the software part. Here we are going to talk about the hardware part a little, because that is a very huge part when we are considering web performance for the people in rural areas. So when I say this, I'm actually saying that phones are comparatively, the compile time and the time that it takes for the parsing of the data, it is 2 to 5 times longer than desktops. And why I say so, let's understand that what are the factors that are actually affecting this time. Let's understand the whys, right? So these are the key factors that affect the web performance, and I'm considering the devices, right? So firstly, you have the processing power. What do you think? The processing power of a laptop is higher, or a mobile phone is higher? Laptop, why? Do you play people who are gamers actually? So do you prefer laptops or mobile phones? Laptops, no? Why? Not because just because of larger screen, but there are more factors. Faster, correct? Because of faster. It's just that the mobile is a bit handy, and obviously some people might not be gamers, so they might not be using laptops, they will be using mobile phones, right? So that is where I'm talking about the processing part. So the CPU and GPU capabilities actually influence the web performance and the way you actually parse the data. That is why when I'm comparing mobiles and laptops, laptops have greater CPU and GPU capabilities, right, in comparison to mobile phones. Moving forward, memory. Laptops and mobile phones, which have greater memory or storage, what do you think? Or you yourself, when you take laptops, you take a 8 GB RAM or 16 GB? 16, right? And generally, if you are coding, you wouldn't prefer a mobile phone, even a tablet, right, for coding. You will prefer a laptop, correct? And that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about capabilities. Laptops generally have a lot of capabilities in terms of hardware, whereas if I compare that with mobile phones, you might not see that. Network connectivity, obviously that comes from area to area. That is not very specific to your devices, but then there are some devices which not support 2G or might not be supporting 5G, right? There are many older devices that comes with mobile phones as well as your laptops. Next, you have browser compatibilities. Again, the same thing. You might have a few browsers that are not compatible, maybe on phones or on laptops. And then there are a lot of factors that are actually going to affect your web performance in terms of devices, when I say. Screen size, resolution, battery life, then cache, the storage that they have. So these are all the factors. Now, I hope you understand when I was actually talking about devices and how devices are actually affecting the web performance in these rural areas. So what I said, I told that what is the device usage in rural areas? They use mobile phones, right? And now, when I'm talking about this, I'm telling you that mobile phones might not have the hardware capabilities what laptops would have, right? That wouldn't be a case for many mobile phones. Obviously, if you compare a good mobile phone and iOS with just a random laptop, obviously that's an exceptional case. But here, I'm just taking a general example. So now, we have the answer to our talk, which is the secret web performance metric. What do you think it would be? So I see people waiting. I'll ask you to hold some more patience. Should I ask you? Ta-dan. This is patience, actually. So this is just something that I would like to propose. It's not an actual web performance metric. This is a web metric that I would like to propose. It is patience. Now you guys would be like, "Aye? Ye kya hai?" So, okay, why I'm saying metric? Why I'm saying patience? So remember again, I'll take you 4 years back when I told you कि यार you guys were using 2G network, 2G, 3G, है ना? And you used to wait. You used to wait, right? You had patience, which you don't have nowadays. So people in rural areas, that is what they do. They hold some patience. But the question is, when I'm talking about patience metric, what I also want to tell you is that you held some patience when you had 2G and 3G networks. But there was a point, no, when you knew that now the website has broken. Like, it's not going to work. I'll have to refresh. I'll have to do the same thing again, right? It's not that na कि you are like looking for something and then you are saying कि यार 10 minute wait कर लेता हूँ, इसमें तो हो ही जाएगा load. ऐसा नहीं होता ना. You just max to max used to wait for 1 minute or 2 and then you decided ये नहीं चल रहा है, I'll have to move forward or I'll have to reload, right? So that is what I'm talking about, patience. Patience तो है पर कितना patience भाई, ऐसा नहीं है ना पूरे दिन I'll wait. So that is what I'm going to talk about, that how long are you willing to wait for a website to load before you decide that it is actually broken, right? So ठीक है, this is what the patience metric is. Now when we are saying कि यार in rural areas everything is slow, मतलब सब कुछ ही it is at an extent जहाँ पे हम कह सकते हैं कि there is a worse situation in case of web performance. Everything is slow. maybe connectivity, if I talk about devices, everything is slow. But what can we do? अब ऐसा नहीं है ना कि if we have bad resources, we cannot do anything about that. Yes, we can surely do. Let's see that what can we do if everything is slow. So the first thing that we can do is showing clear messages, guys. So this is a point when we'll talk a bit about UX experience also and the messages that we generally show. So there should be some digital literacy while you are showing the messages. Generally, you might have seen कि if a data is taking some time to load, in the UI, it either shows you some loading ka, icon, or it tells that it might take some time to actually fetch the data. So you can maybe try later. So these messages are very important so that user can actually hold some patience. So the design should always show clear status messages to the user. And so that is what I was telling about the information should be very clear that what is actually what is exactly the issue that is going on in the backend. So what is going on, how long can it take, once error occurs, and what can be done. So these messages should be very clear, or else guys, the user might not even come to your website for the next time, right? So with the messages, you should be very clear. Now, I'll show you a few UIs in the case when you don't have good network connectivity. You might have seen in case of CRED, you see a game, right? In case of Google Maps, it tells you that no network connection. It is very important. You cannot show a user that something went wrong page. Okay, that's not a good UI. You are actually telling the user that, okay, there is some issue with the network. That is why you are getting this screen. You might get to some other network connection, right? So this is a very clear message. No network connection. Then in Swiggy also it shows you that your internet is little wonky. So this is what I mean by showing clear messages. You cannot show random messages, which I have seen many UIs doing, that they generally write, anything happened, something went wrong. That's not a good UI at all. Okay, take into account digital literacy, use simple languages. Okay, you need not write paragraphs. You can use images also. You can write small messages that are quite descriptive. You can add positive messages like, please come back in some time. If something has went wrong, you can come back in some time, or you can retry once again. And you can explain the consequences also. Sometimes we pull to refresh things, right? So you can add such kind of messages too. Then comes avoid request chaining and round trips. You remember I talked about network latency. Remember network latency, guys there at the back. Remember, right? So we should avoid we should avoid a lot of round trips that might be happening. Now, how can you do that? So there are 3 methods that I'm going to talk about. Preload, prefetch, and pre-connect. How many of you already know about it? Preload, pre-connect, and prefetch. What is it about? If you could help me in understanding. Yeah, please. Hmm? Yeah. Right. Hmm. Got it. So you are somehow talking about pre-connect, and in between you added a bit about preload and prefetch also. So let's talk about preload first. So the web page that you are loading, right? That might require some resources, correct? Now, I hope everyone understands web pages, right? Inside a web page, you might have different pages. Let's consider you have the landing page, that is your index file. Then you have your next page, correct? Now, there can be 3-4 JavaScript files that you might be using in your website, but that second or third JavaScript file that you might be attaching to the index.html is not required when you are actually loading the index, your landing page, right? So some resources aren't even required for the first page load. Guys, when we are talking about web performance, it's firstly about how your first page is actually getting loaded, because that is the first impression for a user, right? So keep that in mind. So now coming back to the preload, prefetch, and pre-connect. So what I was talking, that there are some resources that you might not require for that particular screen or that particular HTML page, right? So why to load that, correct? Because HTML being getting loaded, that would also take time, no? So that is what I'm saying, that you need not load the non-critical resources. You can only load the critical resources. For that, you can use preload, which actually helps you in prefetching, preloading the critical resources that are required for your, let's say, the first page. So for that, how do you actually do it? Let's say you have 3 script files, right? And you only want to load your first JavaScript file, which is very critical to your first page. In that case, to that particular script file, you can give a rel attribute, and you can give the value to it as preload. So it generally gives the highest priority to the script file when you actually load it. Now comes your second thing, that is prefetch. Prefetch is important in terms of the second page or the consequent page that you are going to load. Now, when I was telling you, you are on the first landing page, right? Now comes the second page. On the first page, I need not load the resources that are required for my second page, correct? I hope everyone understands that. But what I can do is, I can subsequently load the next resources, right, for the time being, so that if a person moves to the next page, the resources are already loaded. So this is where your prefetch is actually going to work. It preloads the resources in the lowest priority, but these resources are actually of the highest priorities for your subsequent pages. Okay, this is how prefetch would help you in loading the resources that might be not that critical for your first page load, but are critical for your subsequent page loads. Then you have the third thing, pre-connect. What pre-connect does? Have you guys used some styling libraries or font libraries in web? What do? You add links? Yes or no? How do you connect them? In normal JavaScript, in normal HTML file, how do you link them? You add the path, right? Yes or no? That is what you do, correct? So now when you are connecting to your website to a third-party library, something sort of, that actually takes some time, right? Because DNS handshake would happen, and then it is going to request the data, and you're going to get this response. It's going to take some time. But what pre-connect does, if you see this here, without the pre-connect, what is happening? The DNS handshake happens, then the load time increases generally. But in case of pre-connect, when you add pre-connect, the DNS handshake happens prior to the page loads, and then it reduces the time of that. Obviously, the handshake has already happened. So just the time that is going to be consumed is the time in which you are going to get the data, the response. So that is how your pre-connect is going to help you in case you are linking your third-party apps. Now, lazy loading of non-critical resources. I think many of you might have heard of lazy loading. What is that? What is lazy loading? Again, it is the similar thing, guys. So we might not require every resource on our first page, right? We would want that the critical resources, the resources that are not critical, can take their own time. I just want the things that are important for my website on the first go. So what I'll do, I can use the loading attribute, and the value would be lazy. In this case, what would happen? It would delay the loading of that particular image, which is not that important for my current screen, right? It would take some time. Now, the fourth use case, using network information API. So you can see here a navigator connection.save data. Have you guys seen that sometimes when our battery is on 10 or 12%, it goes to a save mode, right? Save data mode. Everyone might have experienced that. So what happens in that save data mode? your mobile phone or the hardware that is there, it is going to do only the required stuff that is there. It's not going to pick up the things that are not required at that point of time. So this connection.save data, you can actually use it in this case. How? It gives you a value of true and false. So let's say if a person is in save data mode, it is going to give you the value of true, and you can add your code according to that, that maybe I don't want to do these operations when the value comes out to be true. So that is how you can actually make use of the save data feature. The fifth one, limiting third-party resources. Async defer. You might be thinking that I'm talking a lot about JavaScript. So I understand that many people who might not be from the JavaScript background or don't like JavaScript, this could be a reason that JavaScript is a bit slow, and the websites, when you see that websites are slower, it's because of the JavaScript bundles, right? The bundle size. So how do we generally reduce it, or how can we defer? How can we delay the load of the JavaScript files that we don't require for some time? We can use async and defer. I think most of you might already know about it. This is an interesting one. Test for back and forward cache. I don't think many of you might know about it, but this is an interesting one. Back forward cache. So have you guys seen that sometimes, let's say you are loading something, you came to a web page, then you move to the next web page, right? Again, when you come back to the first web page, it only takes a few milliseconds to load that web page. But sometimes what would happen, if you go back to a particular website, it is again going to take the same time in which the first time when it was loading, it's going to take the same time. Why it happens? Because of BF cache. We can also call it BF cache. So I'll tell you it's a in-memory cache. You can see the video one. So if you can see, the user is going to the page. Now he goes back. Again, a new page. So what is actually happening here, the one that I told you, that when he's coming back to the previous page, when you are not using the BF cache, it's taking the same time to load in which you are actually loading it for the first time. But when you use the BF cache, it's not going to take that much time. Why? Because it's going to store the pages in its in-memory cache, right? Now, how you can actually check or test that if your website supports BF cache or not, you can use the dev tools. Any website you can go, like I went to web.dev, and I was checking if BF cache was actually enabled there. So you can go to the applications tab. In the background services, you'll see back and forward cache. You'll click on the test back and forward cache, and if it shows you that successfully served from the back forward cache, it actually means that, yeah, it is supported. So it might be a bit tech heavy for you guys. But anyways, let's go to the seventh one, avoid creating too many layers. How many of you have used CSS before? Many. The basic thing that we do in college first or second year is let's try HTML, CSS. Easy hai bahut. Right? So assuming everyone might have used CSS already. So when I'm talking about why I'm talking about CSS here is that in case of HTML also, the CSS that you create layers. Many of you might have used Z-index, right? In CSS also, the CSS that you create, not every element or component that you create in HTML is in a single layer. It can have multi-layers when you use Z-index. By default, the Z-index is 0, right? Like you have, in a stack, you can consider the layers to be a stack. You have the rest of the page. The element to which you give Z-index as 1. In the stack, it is at the first number. So this is the layers or stacks that I'm talking about. I'll tell you that why I'm actually talking about and why I'm saying that you should avoid layers. Before that, I'll tell you that what all things actually help you in creating layers, and you should avoid it, okay? So first thing, transforms, perspective, 3D transforms in CSS properties, videos, canvas, your animations, transformation property, and then the Z-index. All these things you should prevent. Obviously, if you have to add a video, you cannot do anything. Just try to optimize it. But what I would say, just try to reduce layers as many as possible. Now, why I am telling this? This we'll discuss in the 8th point, avoiding repaint and reflow. So if people might not know, there is a whole flow, as in a whole process that happens when you are actually clicking on a link, like you are searching for something, you hit that URL, whatever you are searching. This is the whole flow actually which is happening. First, this is the whole rendering path, I would rather say. First, your DOM creation happens, just an FYI to give you. A CSOM, a CSS object model is created. A render tree, then a layouting or the reflow stage happens, and then the paint stage happens. Now, what is this reflow or layouting stage? This is where we are going to talk about the layers also. So once the render tree, which is the summation of your DOM tree as well as CSOM, this is where we talk about the render tree. Once that is created, in case of the layout creation phase, the browser begins to calculate the spacing, the position, and everything, and it converts all the elements into the vector boxes. This is called the layouting phase. It's called reflow also, when you're going to when the browser recalculates the spaces, positions, and everything to create the vector boxes. Then the last process is your painting, right? In painting, the vectors that are created in your layouting stage, it's converted into pixels, which you finally see in your website. Now, actually, these layers that you have created, right, these cause reflows and repainting stages. And let me tell you, this layout creation and painting stage are very costly in this whole rendering path. So generally, every process that is going to help you in reflow or repainting stages, you should avoid them. Okay, anything that is actually causing repaint and reflow, you should avoid these. So yeah, this is all about, and there are obviously, it's not just that these are the only solutions that we have many other things. You can also optimize images, not just using lazy loading, but there are many ways to optimize images also. That is what you can do, and there are many other ways in which you cannot make your websites the fastest, right? But you can make it less slow, I would say, right? So these are some useful resources which you guys can actually take a picture of this. They will actually help you in understanding all the concepts that I've covered. Not everyone might be knowing about prefetch and all the terms that I used. All the web devs might know this, but yeah. So you guys can click a picture of this. And that's all from my end, guys. Thanks a lot. This is, if we have some time, I guess we do have some time. So any questions are welcome.
Yes, please, anybody? From this side, that side, anybody's question something?
Yeah, I guess there, 2 people are there.
Hello. Hi. So I actually going through one major problem talking about the performance, which is something called as main thread, the JavaScript main thread execution. So the time. I searched a lot, like literally a lot. How do I reduce that, ma'am? So if there's any idea where you can talk about this for a minute, it would be great. Thanks.
Right, so we can use a web worker there. So the main thread, if you'll use a web worker, I exactly don't remember. It's mostly not a service worker, it's a web worker that you can use in that case. So you are right. So main thread is the main thing that is actually, if it takes a longer time, it can hinder all your processes, right? If your main thread is blocked. So in that case, you can actually use a web worker. What is a web worker? It's just a separate main thread. So what you can do, the resources that you actually feel might block your main thread, you can move all those resources to your web workers, and it would move parallelly with all the other things, leaving your main thread. Yeah. Yeah, next, I guess.
Yeah. So when you talked about BF cache, And you
Yeah.
said we could go into developer tools and check
Yeah.
for it. What are the factors that decide that it is working, and if it is not, if the browser says otherwise, what are the factors we can take
Uh,
to turn it on again?
to turn the BF cache on again.
Yeah, you said we could test it, right?
Yeah, we could test it. So it's not just like you'll have to add some code changes for it, right? So if you test it, so you basically saying, let's say if you add the code changes and if you are testing and still it doesn't work, how you can actually check.
Yeah.
Right. So I won't go to the code depth that sense in case of debugging you are saying. Won't be able to help you exactly as in how you can debug if the BF cache works or not. You'll have to use the same tool to check. There is no other tool as of now which I can call out to help you in debugging if the BF cache works or not. That's just a normal code check that you'll have to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have few seconds and we can take the last question.
I am actually from the Flutter background.
Okay.
Can you help me with any cache bursting techniques on browsers?
Cache burst
cache
techniques.
bursting, like we deploy something,
Huh.
but the changes does not reflect properly. We have to hard reload multiple times.
Yeah, so,
So something related, like we deploy
Huh.
and cache gets cleared automatically on customers' browser, something like that.
got it. I myself haven't done anything which is particular to the browser, I would say, rather than I have used API techniques which would actually help you in bursting the cache. So at this point of time, I might not be able to answer your question in terms of browser, because you can do the same thing from the APIs also, just to.
How?
So in APIs, when you burst the cache, have you used Redis or something like that?
Yes.
It's quite straightforward, right?
Yes.
Using the APIs, you can actually hit if you want the value as, if you want to burst the cache, there is a cycle. From the API itself, you can pass a param. That's quite straightforward. And if you pass that param, the Redis cache that you are hitting is going to generate, like the key would be saying just that it's going to burst the cache in that case. Like very straightforward. In other caches that you might be doing it in the quite similar way. It's a similar way in Redis also. You just need to add the param.
So if we add the param, the
Yes.
browser cache will get cleared or something?
It's not the browser cache, I would say. It's not about the browser cache. That's what I told you. I'll not be able to help you with the browser cache bursting, but this is the backend cache, the data cache bursting, I would rather say.
Got your point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a lot.